Information on this case is scarce, given that it occurred 118 years ago, and most of the primary sources of information have either been lost or poorly preserved. However, even though some people might refer to the Blue Blanket Butcher as an urban legend, I assure you, this is not an urban legend. My account primarily relies on information found on occult chronicles, Japanese Wikipedia, and locals that have heard about this case or had access to old Japanese newspapers. If you're wondering, is there any more information on Blue Blanket Butcher? The answer is probably not. Everything I have found available on this case is included in this video. If somehow you come upon details about this case that are not mentioned in this video, please leave a comment. Welcome to Mr. Winter Wonderland channel. Subscribe now and let's unravel the wonders of our world together. Now, let's get to today's video. On February 11, 1906, in a town called Mikuni, located in Japan's Fukui Prefecture, a severe winter storm hit the area, prompting residents to stay indoors. By 5 a.m. the streets were mostly empty and quiet. Due to these conditions, 30-year-old Kaga Murakushi, owner of a store catering to cargo vessels and their crews, wasn't expecting any visitors. He was attending to matters with his employees when, suddenly, the door to his shop slid open and an unfamiliar man entered. This visitor, based on his voice, height, and stature, appeared to be a male between the ages of 30 and 35. Neither Kaga nor his employees recognized the man's voice. His appearance was completely obscured, as he had wrapped himself entirely in a thick blue blanket, seemingly taken off someone's bed. The man ignored Kaga's employees, turned to face Kaga, and said, "Your aunt suddenly became sick and collapsed. Please come with me." Given that this man was a complete stranger and adamant about hiding his physical appearance, Kaga was skeptical. However, the stranger was persistent. Due to the man's insistence and the blizzard possibly putting his aunt in further peril, Kaga reluctantly agreed to go with him. After closing his shop, Kaga was last seen heading toward the wooden Shimbo Bridge on the other side of Mikuni town, accompanied by this blanket-clad man. 2 hours later, there was a knock at Kaga's home. His 59-year-old mother, Kiku, answered the door. Standing there was the same man, still wrapped in the blue blanket. He spun a similar tale, claiming he had crossed the bridge from Shimpo village to bring Kiku to a dying relative who was asking for her by name. Worried and panicked, Kiku believed the man completely, and left with him after donning her winter clothing. Her last reported sighting was also near the bridge with this man. The man made his next appearance an hour later when he returned to Kaga's family home. This time, Kaga's 25-year-old wife, Zuo, answered the door. The man repeated the exact story he told Kiku. Zuo, like Kiku, believed him, got dressed, and headed outside. Zuo and Kaga had a 2-year-old child, who was being babysat by a neighbor. The man in the blue blanket apparently learned of the child's existence much later. 40 minutes after leaving with Zuo, he returned without her and approached the neighbor's home for his final appearance. The babysitter, Mio Asai, answered the door. The man claimed that he was sent to collect the child to bring them to the same sick relative. Like Kaga before her, Mio was highly skeptical and took her task of caring for the child seriously. Despite the ongoing blizzard, she refused to hand the child over to a stranger without the parents' permission. By all witness accounts, the man in the blue blanket spoke in a calm tone. However, when Mio defied him, he became aggressive and insistent, demanding that the child go with him. After Mio refused for the final time, the man snarled, an evil sound as Mio described it, before turning around and leaving. In the early hours of February 12, a local carpenter, on his way to work, crossed the wooden Shimbo Bridge. He suddenly stopped in his tracks when he came across a large, fresh bloodstain on the wood and snow in the middle of the bridge. Additionally, the guardrail on a section of the bridge appeared to have been cut away by an axe. No bodies were found at the scene, but the large amount of blood suggested foul play. The carpenter quickly contacted the nearest police. The small town's police force arrived at the bridge, and investigators examined the broken guardrail and the large bloodstain. Based on the evidence, they concluded that someone had been murdered on the bridge, and their body had been thrown into the Takeda and Kazuryu rivers. The police conducted surveys in both Shimpo and Mikuni, searching for any missing persons or bodies. During these efforts, they discovered a small wooden boat moored on the Takeda River near the Kaga family home. More bloodstains were found on the side of the boat. The police continued their search and eventually found Suo's body further downstream from the boat, sunk at the bottom of the river. They concluded that the blood on the boat belonged to her, and that the killer likely ferried her across the river before killing her and throwing her body overboard. Realizing they were out of their depth, the local police requested assistance from the Fukui Prefectural Police. The request was granted, and soon various officers arrived in the small town to search the estuary of the Kuzuru River. On February 14th, they recovered Kiku's body. After the bodies of Kaga's wife and mother were found, Kaga Murakushi became the police's main suspect, as no trace of him could be found, and it appeared as if he had fled in a hurry. However, the police later reconsidered after a physician examined the bloodstain on the bridge and determined it was too much to have come from just one person. They concluded that Kaga was likely a victim as well. His body was never found and likely never will be. The police questioned Mio and Kaga's employees, which is when they learned about the man in the blue blanket. The police questioned all of Kaga and Suo's family, friends, and relatives. Not one of them was sick, dying, or had requested to see Kaga, Kiku, or Zuo. The man in the blue blanket had used a false story to lure his victims away from their home, and he likely intended to kill Kaga and Suo's child as well, if not for Mio's intervention. Despite their efforts, the police had little luck identifying the man. The best description they had was from a witness. I think it was a man around 30 years old. He had a towel wrapped around his head, tied at the chin, and on top of that, the blue blanket covered his head and body completely, so I can't give you any clear details. With so little to go on, the trail quickly went cold. Unable to identify the man based on his appearance, the police focused on finding a motive. As all the victims belonged to the same family and the killer had no qualms about murdering a 2-year-old child, the police believed the motive was personal. When they questioned villagers and residents of Mikuni, everyone struggled to believe anyone could hold a grudge against the family. Kaga was described as a hardworking, reliable, and honest man who even abstained from drinking alcohol. Despite this, the police persisted with their theory, believing the crime was planned, targeted, and premeditated. The killer ignored Kaga's employees and had no intention of harming Mio, despite his intent to kidnap and kill Kaga and Suo's child. Instead of attacking Mio to get to the child, he simply gave up and left. The police settled on jealousy as the motive, jealousy over Kaga's successful business and, according to some sources, his beautiful wife. Yet they found no leads, no evidence, no fingerprints, no weapon, no axe, no body, and no blue blanket. The police couldn't identify a suspect, despite their suspected motive. The only lead was that the killer likely had knowledge of sailing and operating a vessel, given Suo's murder on a boat. 4 years later, on July 25, 1910, also in Mikuni town, a 26-year-old man named Yutaro, the son of Shirobei Yutaro, got into a fight with his father. Yutaro, who suffered from severe mental health issues, grabbed an axe and killed his father before running naked through the streets, wildly swinging his axe at anyone he could find. He injured 24 people during this 30-minute rampage before 20 police officers surrounded and apprehended him. What interested investigators about this incident was the weapon of choice and how it occurred just down the road from Kaga's former shop. Yutaro soon became a suspect. However, he was quickly dismissed as one. The crime against Kaga's family seemed to have been committed by a level-headed and intelligent individual, with clear pre-planning. The statute of limitations passed in 1921, and all investigations into the murder ceased. Despite the statute of limitations passing, one more lead emerged after the fact. On December 12, 1926, a 49-year-old man named Nizaburo Tanimoto was arrested for several thefts in Kyoto. Unexpectedly, during interrogation, he confessed to being the man in the blue blanket and claimed responsibility for the murders. However, Nizaburo was never seriously considered a viable suspect. His story constantly changed, contradicting the evidence, and he had a reputation as a known liar. He had no record of violent crimes, and he had an alibi for the murders, as he wasn't even in Mikuni at the time. Both the police and the general public believed Nizaburo only confessed for attention and to waste the police's time. Even if Nizaburo had been telling the truth, the statute of limitations had already passed, so he would have walked free regardless. The case went completely cold afterward, with no more leads emerging. 118 years later, it remains unsolved. That is all for today. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video. Until next time, take care.